Hey guys, how's it going? Today we are going to talk about the ancient science, the ancient microbial science in the Rigveda. And this is my copy here. It's just a collection of 108 of the hymns, but there are over 1,000 in total. And these are coming from around 1000 BC, so they're about 3,000 years old as they are written down. Now, one thing we need to talk about before we get into this is the nature of these ancient musical texts. They could have been hundreds of years, they could be thousands of years older than when they were written down. They were orally passed down. They were told by whatever priest or shaman equivalent that a tribe or so may have had, and they would perform these tales, these musical plays. They were concerts, right? And because we didn't have writing, they used mnemonic memory technology. They memorized them because it was musical, and you have musical rhythm and poetry connections to memory. You're able to memorize thousands of words, thousands of lines of text, of information, of story through music. Campfires or temples or Neolithic sites of some sort. They would be performed. And these tales are very dynamic. From generation to generation, they could change, and they change based off of the experiences, the history, the topography, the weather, the stars, and other major events. So they were very fluid, and these stories were very much alive and evolving. And what they encompassed, and this doesn't really ever get talked about, there were not as many fields of study in the ancient world. So in ancient times, you didn't have different fields of study the way we do today. We have psychology, astronomy, biology. We have doctors and chemists and historians and authors and poets and musicians, and just the whole panoply of different fields that we have, which has benefits in that you can focus on that your whole life and get really, really good at that thing and learn a lot from it. But in ancient times, that was not the case. What they did was they combined all of those fields that we've since bifurcated, that we've since divided. They had all of those fields of study into one single narrative, which is the musical hymns of the pre-written down ancient texts that we have still today. They incorporated astrology, they incorporated local history, folklore, they incorporated creation. So you had philosophy, you had religion, you had chemistry, you had plant knowledge and plant medicine, you had the lay of the land, the topography, you had the memory of the past generations and perhaps where they came from. You had origin stories of your people. You had morals and ethics. You had history. You had fictional tales. You had the personification of many different forces. And it was all wrapped up in this musical narrative. And this formed the basis of religion across the entire world. And so these ancient surviving texts that were written as hymns, as these musical compositions incorporating the general knowledge of a people, because you had to kind of wrap it up into one composition in order to pass it down to the next person and so on through the musical concerts that they would play for each other. And so this is important to understand because it provides the axiom of information that we have on the ancient way of life and the ancient mind. We're going to go through one specific field of study that this ancient text reveals to us, which is the overall main study of my channel for the past few months, which is investigating the ancient microbial science, unconsciously identified and encoded into folklore and religions. The author of this particular selection of the Rigveda has some commentary between each hymn and each chapter that it's divided into. The Rigveda is a sacred book, but it is a very worldly sacred book. Nowhere can we find the tiniest suspicion of a wish to renounce the material world in favor of some spiritual quest. Religion is the handmaiden of worldly life. The gods are invoked to give the worshipper the things he wants: health, wealth, long life, and progeny. This is not to say that there is anything superficial about Vedic religious concerns, but merely that these meditations stem from a life-affirming, joyous celebration of human existence. One thing that I've recognized different from the Rigveda that sets it apart from many other different religions, ancient religions, in context of their time periods, right, from which we understand them in our modern time, is that it doesn't differentiate between the spiritual meanings behind rituals and their influence over the physical life. It's not that these rituals and ceremonies that went alongside the Rigveda were to just be, you perform this and hopefully you get some good grace from God, right? Maybe you won't, maybe you will. That's not the point of the worship. The point of the worship is to simply give praise to God and be thankful. With the Rigveda, it's so much more intentional. It's this ritual is for this. If you want to have wealth, if you need to have better health, if you need better food, if you need to have a good harvest, if you need to purify your mind or your mental space or your physical space, if you need good weather, if you need to defeat your enemies, they have the rituals are, there's so much less fluff to the religious incorporation to into daily life. And I think this was true for most fertility cults up until it became less about the fertility cult and more about the control of religion. Right, so we see this is very interesting in the Rigveda already, is that it is a much more literal interpretation that goes with these rituals. And keep in mind that the Rigveda had ceremonies and rituals and different events that went alongside the hymns. So they were not just, it was not just singing them, but it was performing them and it was doing ceremonies alongside them. I don't think we know all of those, so all we have are the words that they would have sung alongside these ceremonies or before these ceremonies or after these ceremonies. So this section on death we will start with. So in this burial hymn, in the first verse, "Go away, death, by another path that is your own, different from the road of the gods. I say to you who have eyes, who have ears, to not injure our children or our men." So already we see that death is personified and is intelligent and can react and interact with your behavior, with your attention. They are saying to death that, and acknowledging it can hear and see them, to leave them alone, to leave their children alone, to not harm them. They are shooing death away. I set up this wall for the living, so that no one else among them will reach this point. Let them live 100 full autumns and bury death in this hill. So here it seems we have a marking of a graveyard, right? I set up this wall, some sort of stone probably, that is marking off where death is going to be at. You know, the hope that you live 100 years. And then at the end they say, bury death in this hill, right? Some sort of burial mound where you're going to section off, mark off a place as being for the dead, for death, and zoning it out, creating this sort of barrier where death will not spread. Open up, earth, do not crush him, be easy for him to enter and to burrow in. Earth, wrap him up as a mother wraps the son in the edge of her skirt. We have this sort of personification of the earth to embrace the dead, to make it easy for them through their passage from life to death, kind of naturally embrace them in their burial. But in understanding how the world works today, with modern microbiology, we know that disease and death and sickness and wounds and scars and infections and rot and decomposition, all of these are the functions of microbes. And in talking to death and communicating to death, we are seeing a correct identification that there is a force that is inexorable, perhaps has a personality, because it certainly seems to be inconsistent. It is not reliable to fight against. So you have a sort of superstitious ceremonies and rituals and just different performances and verbiage and speech and music and writings and spells to ward off death. What is death? Death is the decomposing forces of the planet, mainly fungus, bacteria, and all sorts of microbes. The identification in speaking to death and trying to put death in one spot so it doesn't spread. I set up this wall for the living so that no one else among them will reach this point. You don't want to be around a dead body because there are spores that can transfer, so you bury the body and you mark it off and say that death will not cross this point. You're trying to prevent the spread and dispersal of spores from the decomposing body. Now when we get to sacred speech, in this, the origins of sacred speech in the second verse, when the wise ones fashioned speech with their thought, sifting it as grain is sifted through a sieve, then friends recognized their friendships, a good sign was placed on their speech. This idea of speech being sacred plays into the fact that they were orally passed down tales. So of course it probably meant a lot more to them when they had to speak these words. In one single hymn, you can explain so much about the world around you, from ethics, philosophy. You could explain weather, you could explain astronomy or astrology, you could explain plant medicine, history, ethics, and you could tell it all in a fictional tale. So speech is extremely sacred and important. And on top of that, speech is magical. And when you think of sanctity, sacredness, holiness, magic, all of that is the ancient understanding of how it interacts with the microbial. And so, like in the previous verse where you have this intention of keeping death away, asking death, it has ears and eyes, to tell it to leave your children alone, to leave your family alone, to leave you alone so you don't get sick. You are using this quality of speech, which is that it can interact with microbes. And the function or process in which that occurs could be explained in several ways. Perhaps it is just purely vibratory. Perhaps the intelligent microbes, they react and interact to your intentions, to which is relevant to Hinduism, your karma, right? Your ability to attract or to escape the influences of microbes, which is going to be considered luck, poor health, or your gaining of wealth, your prosperity, right? It's directly influenced by microbes. If you want to understand the world, think of it through this metaphor. Plants and animals are structures, they're constructs of microbes, including us, of course. And so compare it to a city. The buildings, the buses, the streets, the restaurants, the factories of a city are the plants and animals of the world. Now, the drivers, the workers, the cooks, the businessmen, all of the actual people running the city are the microbes in this metaphor. So us plants and animals of this world, we are these sort of constructs, we are these systems, we are these conglomerate colonies of microbial functions. And so when these ancient texts, they're personifying death, they're personifying the sun, the forces of nature, of healing, of holiness and sanctity, they are describing accurately. It is not as if these people were primitive and were trying desperately to understand a world and were too dumb to come to any conclusions other than making it up in fiction. That's not at all what's happening. They are correctly identifying time and time again as we keep learning about microbes and the influence of microbes and what they do, and in personifying them we understand that in their perspective microbes have intelligence and react to your intentions, your behaviors. If you're a sinner, you'll have bad microbes. If you're doing good and being nice and being kind, you will attract better microbes. It'll be healthier. Now, our science needs to catch up with, one, the microbial intelligence, and two, with the intention that influences microbes. Humans and animals and plants are just microbes on a larger scale that have still in them billions of microbes. And they understand this through the personification of curses and forces and disease and demons. But we need to continue. I have another verse in the speech hymn. Verse 8. I am the one who blows like the wind, embracing all creatures. Beyond the sky, beyond this earth, so much have I become in my greatness. So they sort of personified speech as this idea that what you say connects to everything in the universe in maybe a synchronistic, maybe in a collective way, maybe just in a sort of energetic way, right? They have this idea that your word here, perhaps your prayer here, can affect someone on the other side of the planet. And I would argue that this is done through a microbial network. And so now we have these priest hymns, the sacrificial priests. This is verses 3 and 4. And if the hearing of our song is weighty enough, then the ripe crop will come nearer to the scythes. The inspired poets who know how harness the plow and stretch the yokes on either side to win favor among the gods. This hymn is a kind of work song for priests, likening their ritual work to the work of the farmers in the field, as well as other occupations and pastimes. Again, we see this very literal application of the religious life incorporated in the Rigveda. These priests, while it may have been someone's job to plant and harvest seeds and do all the yard work in farming, the priests, their job was just as important in trying to earn the favor of the gods. Who are the gods? The microbes that will ultimately decide whether your harvest gets infected, whether it turns out good, how it survives, is entirely based off of the fungus and bacteria and other microbes that get involved in it. And since they couldn't see these microbes, they still correctly identified microbes through the force, through the personification, through the deification of forces that they could observe were inconsistent based off of what they could and couldn't see. So even though they didn't have microbes, they correctly identified that you can do this. We know this through, you can name your plants. We know this through the rice experiment. We know this through fermentation. And we know this through the placebo and many other effects, the law of attraction, just having good intention to fighting to survive, if you're sick, and just being positive. These are the effects of that, and we have observed these. We just haven't started to make the connection that it is through the microbial consciousness, through microbial intelligence, in which we are communicating to and from and influencing these positive and negative outcomes. There is this part in sacrificing a horse that they have a hymn on, and this is verse 10 and 11. Whatever food remains in his stomach, they're talking about the horse, sending forth gas, or whatever smell there is from his raw flesh, let the slaughterers make that well done. Let them cook the sacrificial animal until he is perfectly cooked. Whatever runs off your body when it has been placed on the spit and roasted by the fire, let it not lie there in the earth or on the grass, but let it be given to the gods who long for it. So they had special care into the decomposing corpse of a sacrificed animal, in that you couldn't remove it from the animal because it could spread, right? This vague sense of death can spread. They're obviously identifying microbial reproduction and dispersal. So whatever food remains in his stomach, sending forth gas, that's the decomposition, or whatever smell there is from his raw flesh, the decomposition, let the slaughterers make that well done. Let them cook the sacrificial animal until he is perfectly cooked. So whatever's in there, just cook it. That's how you purify and cleanse bacteria in meat and other food sources. If you cook it to a high enough degree, you can kill every living colony in that food. That smoke that it becomes, the smoke from the fire, from burning off those microbes is being offered back into the world, into the gods, right? We can think of as dual personifications of all of the different fields we talked about at the beginning. They are microbes, they are forces of nature, they are weather events, they are astronomical and astrological events, they are good and bad things that happen in every aspect of life, and that's what the gods are personifying. Because through the personification, you were able to communicate directly to the microbes. They didn't have a name for different species of bacteria and fungus, but they did have gods, and through that vessel of personification, they could communicate with these forces. So this hymn is sky and earth. These divinities, referred to in the dual, are alternately characterized as male and female, parents of the sun, or as two sisters. So the sky and the earth. The son of these parents, their clever charioteer, with the power to make things clear. So the son of these parents, the son of the sky and the earth, is the sun. And the charioteer is often referred to, what pulls the sun, as in many other mythologies. With the power to make things clear, purifies the universe by magic. So that is the light of the sun, causing purification through magic. That is something we hear all the time across every single culture. The reason why sunshine in religious sense is always equated to holiness, to purification, to cleansing aspects that by magic makes you healed, makes you holy. Those ideas, healed, holy, magic, sunlight, those themes are based off of its effects on the microbial. The sunlight in general, kills most bacteria. That is why in houses and in shade is where fungus grows for the most part. And the sunlight, it purifies you because it kills those microbes. And that is why sunlight is holy. Holiness and purity and cleansing, those occur when you are cleared of microbes, when your microbiome is balanced. I call upon Aditi's gift that dispels evil and repels assault, the celestial, awe-inspiring gift that saves us from violent death. Sky and earth guard us from the monstrous abyss. Here's another example of that invocation of something that is ultimately antimicrobial. If death is caused by microbes, and you've personified death, and you've personified the ability to fight death, you are understanding correctly that there are forces. You just didn't know that they were microbes, right? You understand that that's what you need to stop. Death is this inexorable force, and you need the gift of the gods to fight it off. You need the gods' blessings. You need holiness. You need magic to fight it off. That equates to antimicrobial and antifungal chemicals, processes, and abilities. Whatever wrong we have ever done to the gods, or to an old friend, or to the master of the house, for all of these, let the thought in this hymn be an apology. Sky and earth guard us from the monstrous abyss. And remember, these would have been sung, but they are saying whatever we've done, whatever slight we've made to anyone we've ever met, let me apologize to that. And it's more important that you're apologizing to the world rather than necessarily to the specific person you may have slighted, because maybe you won't ever see that person again. So again, this idea that speech is pervasive throughout the entire universe and the cosmos, right into the microbial, that you can ask for forgiveness so that that sort of karmic force, that microbial force, doesn't negatively affect you. The word for abyss that was used in the Rigveda designates a dark, formless, enormous, and terrifying abyss, particularly associated with night and the underworld, and hence opposed to the light of the worlds of sky and earth. Night being the primary growth period of fungus. More relevantly, of course, the pathogenic fungus that will harm you. So this is a note on the hymn, The House of Clay. The house of clay is a metaphor for death on various planes. It is the urn used to store the ashes of the dead after cremation, or to store their bones in burial. It is the earth, the house of the dead man, and it is the home of Varuna, to which Vasudha went one night. When you read these ancient texts with the context of microbial intelligence and deities being personified, microbial forces, you now get a better understanding, and the gods no longer sound so vague. Let me not go to the house of clay, O King Varuna, not yet. Have mercy, great ruler, be merciful. If through weakness of willpower I have somehow gone against the true current, O pure one, have mercy, great ruler, be merciful. If we humans have committed some offense against the race of gods, O Varuna, or through carelessness have violated your laws, do not injure us, O God, for that sin. Sin is related to curses and to being sick. If sickness is a microbial function and the breakdown of your immune system through microbial infection and decomposition and digestion, in trying to prevent death, in asking for the favor of these certain gods associated with these certain life and death, sickness and health qualities, we know that they are trying to do whatever they can to prevent that by being sorry, by being better people, because they believe that it is directly related to how sick you may get. So they may not understand why the universe is working the way it is, but they are trying to go along with it. They're not trying to offend the gods, which would be seen. And this is what's interesting, is that when you have like rot in your house, when you have mold in your house, or when you have an infection that comes up out of nowhere on your skin, or your animals get sick, or your plants get sick and die, and they get infections, it seems like it came out of nowhere, right? It seems arbitrary. It's not like a river of flowing water where up the river you can see some chunk of dirt flowing through, and you know that, okay, so the water is going to be dirty once the dirt gets here. That's happening, but not on a level that we can see, which is obviously the microscopic. But they do understand that there are things, there are forces, there is energy, there are spirits, right? There are demons and curses and magic floating around, and they're trying to commune with it and earn its favor. And we now understand that to be microbes. And we see, again, that they have another instance of an ancient people, ancient texts, correctly identifying that force and finding ways to tap into it and to communicate with it, to earn its favor and to repel it in its bad forms. Though only 3 entire hymns in the Rigveda are addressed to Rudra, the rich ambivalence of his character is the basis of an important line of Indian theology that culminates in the Hindu god Shiva. Rudra is fierce and destructive like a terrible beast, like a wild storm. The sage begs him to turn his malevolence elsewhere. Yet Rudra is not merely demonic, for he is the healer and cooler, as well as the bringer of disease and destructive fever. So this is the second verse here. By those most healing medicines that you give, Rudra, I would attain 100 winters. Drive hatred far away from us and anguish farther away. Drive diseases away in all directions. So I think when you have a destructive deity, it is not considered evil, just as no decomposing microbe is evil. It has a function, and it's an important function, that ultimately life wouldn't exist without, understood through these destructive deities. And sometimes instead of invoking something that drives away disease, you invoke the thing that causes disease itself to kind of ask it to not approach you, to be away from you. You're asking basically mold and other decomposing forces to leave you be, to spare you, rather than necessarily invoking the sun to purify you, or water to heal you, or some other resource that is antimicrobial. Ultimately, they take advantage of everything, right? You ask the mold to leave you alone while burning antimicrobial incense, which is considered purifying and healing and cleansing, and so you use everything at your disposal to stop these forces. And your parents, your grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, everyone through the line of history of humans and further from all of animal biology and evolution has had to deal with microbes and fungus and pathogens and bacteria, right? This is one constant throughout all of human history, especially when we started living in houses that You had forces that could get into the house that were microbes, that were mold, that were mildew. And you had forces in your body that it could get into that would disrupt your microbiome, like candida or other bacteria that could negatively impact your health. That same arbitrary, and the diseases are personified as demons or curses. Keep far away from us your cow-killing and man-killing power, O ruler of heroes. Have mercy on us and speak for us, O God, and grant us double protection. Which is the idea of protection from not only that God, but from other gods as well. Here we have the waters of life. For our well-being, let the goddesses be an aid to us. The waters be for us to drink. Let them cause well-being and health to flow over us. So water is personified. The healing properties of water are personified as goddesses in the Rigveda. And this is interesting because in water are microbes. And in holy water, whether it's a lake or a spring or rain or a river or the ocean, when it's considered holy is when it has microbial properties that cleanse your own sickness. And this is why in many stories throughout the entire world, you have holy springs where people will go to and suddenly their random disease is cured. And it's cured because the introduction of these microbes in the water completely eradicate whatever microbe was infesting you. And so they personified these microbes as goddesses in the waters, in the holy waters, the waters of life. Here's a quick hymn to arms. So, about invoking these same forces for battle and combat. Once shot, fly far away, arrow, sharpened with prayer. So you would make a shot trying to hit your enemy, and you would pray that you hit them, right? Again, this idea that your intention, your prayer, your words, your speech can influence the world around you. And we see this so directly in the Rigveda. Whereas opposed to the Bible, you may have God smite down my enemies. Here you have fly arrow. You have been sharpened with prayer. I've made my aim better. It's more likely to hit you when I pray that it will. And we have unconsciously maintained this idea even to this day, especially in sports. People will watch sports and they will put all their intentions, and they believe, the jersey you wear is going to help, or throw the ball or kick the ball in or whatever, and it's lingering in the air, and you're, behind your TV or whatever, trying to encourage the ball to be placed exactly how you want it to be for a favorable outcome. And I highlight that because humans are no different than we've always been, and we've always identified ourselves with these methods of operation, with these abilities, with these functions of the world, with microbial forces. We just didn't know that they were microbes until recently. And now with the discovery of microbiology, we have to go back and give an honest take on these ancient texts without calling them fictional stories of just pure myth and trying to explain the world. They are accurate and they work, and it is quite amazing to see the line of reasoning and thinking behind these legends. So now we have hymns on plants. He in whom the plants gather like kings in the assembly, that priest is called a healer, a slayer of demons, an expeller of disease. So demons and disease are the same thing. We see this over and over again. Rather, it is, the demon that causes the disease. The disease is the manifestation of a demon. The demon is, of course, microbes. He in whom the plants gather like kings in the assembly. When they ingest these plants, they believe that there are qualities of the plant that gathers and fights off the demon. Right? These are the chemical interactions of antimicrobial plants. A lot of traditional Indian cuisine, the employment of extremely powerful antimicrobial herbs and spices and plants and vegetables are used, like turmeric and garlic and neem and cardamom and clove and cinnamon and so on, and all these spices that are popular in Indian cuisine are medicinal, and their whole structure of Ayurveda and Vedic astrology and yoga and all of those fields that come from the different ancient texts and the practices of of the ancient Hindu and ancient Indians, they have some of the most accurate and applicable and useful information on microbial and antimicrobial functions, because, as I was saying, everyone from time has had to deal with these things. Being clean and being sick and being healthy and doing the right thing, having a good mental state, not being angry, not having mental disease and disorders. All of these things are caused by microbes and the breakdown of your body through those microbes. So we've all had to deal with it, and even 3,000 years ago, this information, their antimicrobial science encoded in these ancient texts, these ancient mnemonic songs, is as relevant as ever and could be studied purely scientifically like we're doing. Let them free me from the effects of a curse, and also from what comes from Varuna, and from the fetter sent by Yama, and from the offense of the gods. There are many diseases associated with certain gods. Like a water god could be associated with diseases because when you leave water somewhere, rot will grow, and that rot is a disease, it is a demon, it is a curse. So to be free from the effects of a curse, to no longer have that offense of the gods weighing down on them. Do not harm the man who digs you up, nor him for whom I dig you up. Let all our 2-footed and 4-footed creatures be without sickness. And even their idea and association with plants is leagues above anything we have today, because here they are speaking from the perspective of the plant. They are asking it, do not harm us for pulling you out, for digging you up. And they refer to themselves as 2-footed, and then their livestock and whatnot, their horses and their cows, and 4-footed creatures be without sickness. So they have such a deep understanding of plants and the consciousness of plants and the sanctity of plants. So they're asking the plants as they pick them that they are sorry to not cause sickness to them, that they are using them to help them, because the plants they know are healing and they're holy, and so they're respecting that. You growing plants who hear this, and those who have gone far away, all coming together, unite your power in this plant. So they're invoking in one single particular plant, let's just say it's a medicinal herb or something, and they're invoking all the other plants that have gone before it, that have scattered across the world, and that are currently growing, that have been eaten. So this kind of essence of plants, of that herb, of that healing quality, of that chemical and microbial quality, to be gathered in this plant so that it can be effective for helping them. They're using that universal speech, that microbial network, that intention to have the best chance of healing. Plant, you are supreme. The trees are your subjects. Let the man who seeks to injure us be our subjects. This is a hymn against bad dreams and sins. Go away, master of thought. Get out and wander in the far distance. In the far distance say to destruction, the thought of a living creature is of many kinds. We can see them invoking bad thoughts, mental disorder, mental illness, anger, bad decisions, which is caused through imbalances of microbes and diet and chemistry and hormones. Lord of the house, you who drive away diseases and permeate all forms, be a gentle friend to us. This is a verse from a sleeping hymn. And they have verses for safe pregnancy, for safe birth, safe sleep, where they're invoking gods to form the womb, to form the embryo, to make it have a safe journey through its cycles of birth and through the actual process of birth. They're invoking these spirits to encourage that. So they use this for every aspect of their life. See, to protect the embryo. Let Agni, the killer of demons, unite with this prayer and expel from here the one whose name is evil, who lies with disease upon your embryo, your womb. The one whose name is evil, who lies with disease upon your embryo, your womb, the flesh eater. Agni has driven him away with prayer. So you can imagine this being a musical, the way they repeat things, the way they verse the verbiage and the subject. It's all sort of this kind of magical shape language that they're musically trying to use to invoke these sort of good and bad things that happen based on the microbial functions. The one who spreads apart your two thighs, who lies between the married pair, who licks the inside of your womb, we will drive him away from here. The one who by changing into your brother or your husband or your lover lies with you, who wishes to kill your offspring, we will drive him away from here. The one who bewitches you with sleep or darkness and lies with you, we will drive him away from here. They're usually talking about Rakshasas, which are kind of like these earthly demons, these night demons, kind of like an incubus or something similar to that. These kind of like minor malevolent spirits that can cause your children to be stillborn. I did a previous video on this from the Semitic perspective of Lilith, the sort of idea of sex demons, and through the discharge during your sleep of either man or woman, it was thought that you were being invaded by a demon and it was, you know, draining your energy, your essence. And so you have invocations against those. And these processes, they happen because of certain microbe interactions of the night, usually associated with just different pathogenic psychotropic mycotoxins, for example, that could cause different interactions of your body during sleep, sleepwalking, sleep talking, weird abnormalities and anomalies. These are caused by microbes, and so again, you have that defense against that. In banishing all evil spirits to a dark hole, the poet also takes the opportunity to wish evils upon the head of his rival priest, a sorcerer, who apparently accuses the author of the hymn of being a sorcerer himself. Here's a couple of verses. Kill the owl sorcerer, the owlet sorcerer, the dog sorcerer, the cuckoo sorcerer, the eagle sorcerer, the vulture sorcerer. Indra, crush the demon to powder as with a millstone. Do not let the demon of the sorcerers get close to us. Let the light blot out the fiends who work in couples. Let the earth protect us from earthly anguish, and the middle realm of space protect us from the anguish of the sky. So they're clearly having this like this rivalry in which you're trying to control these forces, and if you control these forces, you're considered a sorcerer or a witch. And so your life could depend on whether you can control these forces more so than your rival, your enemy. There's so much packed into the Rigveda, and these are just a couple verses from a couple hymns out of over 1,000. And already it gives you such an interesting insight into these people and how they lived and the traditions that they ultimately passed down to our modern day, modern life, and a lot of these unconscious things that we do that we don't know how to explain, or even the very fact that we even have religion, what religion was. In part, it was all these different fields and incorporated and decoded into these mnemonic songs. But more than that, we have very specific microbiology science that is often conflated as just of being like metaphysical superstition of spirits and curses and demons and stuff like that. But when we actually break it down, we understand that it is microbial, not in a mechanistic way, in a way that is intelligent and interacts and reacts to all of these intentions and being kind and having that sort of good karma that we've come to sort of associate with Hinduism in like the pop culture sense, right? Those are just some thoughts, I guess, to end the video on. Yeah, I encourage you to read the Rigveda or any ancient text and think of intelligent microbial processes behind a lot of what's being said. And I'll continue to make more videos on different ancient texts. And there's so much more, even just in the Rigveda, I could do on other subjects. But yeah, that's enough for the video today. Thanks for watching, and peace out.